set like, it's the size of that, the size, that much, I mean, that much. I love this house, it's very comfortable.
It is, it's very relaxed, there's a little bit of restoration hardware vibe to it.
Yes,
but
yes, it's got.
For a home that's gotta be 10,000 square feet, I mean, there's a lot of very comfortable areas where you can really relax.
So she was like, you come in, and all there was two bedrooms, and she wanted this, you know, those barn doors, so there's a living area.
Yeah.
Like it's really comfortable, and then you can walk in the other living area, just there, and it's like a little table, desk, bar.
There's a lot of spots in there, huh?
With barn doors, and she said, her husband had made at his work, and she said, they were very good. So you can close that off, so it's two separate. Then you
Ready to
walk
learn?
in, and this upstairs, it's just like 1, 2, 3, and it's just another.
Got a 10 o'clock, so.
You go left, and then
Can't decide where to
you go
sit.
left, and then
I think I want one with a ledge.
that,
That's what I'm trying. Just sneaks what I need.
Make it clean getaway.
No, I just have no class. Okay.
Hey, Danny. Morning.
I was just like, honey, and then I'm ready to do justice. And then, like, it's just so big.
Morning, John.
And then,
I can't imagine what you're expecting to be. God.
I don't even know, and then you go into, so there's two bedrooms down there. But then
That's where the girls are.
well, there's one bedroom, yeah, bedroom down there, downstairs.
Oh, really?
For 6-year-old girl, the home washer and dryer. 6-year-old washer and dryer.
Those kids are
I like being on the edge, just make a quick getaway if I need
I
to.
saw the washer and dryer, and I was like, that's kind of weird, is these bedroom. Then of course, it's upstairs.
Yeah.
And then, but we rent
Is there one in the pool house too, in the pool room? Yeah. Like, people come in, I thought there was a laundry in there too.
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
What's interesting is, what I really like is, okay, here's the kitchen. Here's the kitchen, but then you kind of walk down, just like it goes down, and right when they put in the kitchen, right when they put in the elephant, right in the, there's a door, and just a bar, slide, and you walk, it's this big.
Yeah.
And you walk is like this wide and it has.
How handy.
So what I would.
Oh, wow.
They have.
Yeah, the building's torn down, like 2 houses to expand the yard there. And,
And now
yeah.
they're selling those.
I would shake your hand.
Oh, are they?
Because, well, because she said one of the reasons is downtown.
Oh, yeah, you have to be able to get your own in to be able to take care of the yard.
Yeah,
and
no,
she's
he was
like,
out.
and
Okay, I'm in also.
Okay.
I missed a couple of minutes. Yeah, give us at least 35.
Yeah,
you want to pick up the first thing?
Well, it just depends on the day usually.
I know, it's not like you have a football field where it's like, it's a park, yeah.
Well, there you go, there's the problem.
Well, I ran for a long while, right? I was just sold for 25.
I was gonna take one more.
So I drove that.
Good, are you?
Oh, pretty
That's why you guys people there.
Yeah.
I usually set my.
I love that lower level, that pool
Set
area.
my control, like 5 or 12. That way,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of time, but I know it's fast, but if I didn't see it,
Yeah, we see how some of these truckers drive, they're going like 60, 70, and I'm like,
She's
don't like
a
cops.
So
How long you been in there?
Well, about 2 years.
Okay.
But you always.
Yeah, yeah.
How's it going so far?
I'm showing the home tomorrow, or tonight.
That's good.
I'm doing, the property listings tomorrow, I think, we're meeting. So,
Pretty good for your first month.
yeah, and I made an offer a couple days ago, and it's accepted, but
It's like, you know those things
oh,
that you like
it's not hard getting people to manage my time, because I basically retired. I got used to it. I got income, I got residual income coming in, so I got used to have a cup of coffee in the morning and take a walk. And so now I know like how much garbage you can feed with me.
Time management is okay.
Yeah.
I take my mornings.
And nights of the weekend, I mean, you gotta be there.
I know, that's where I am, I'm right.
Schedule based on routine here. It's good to have a routine. Like even if you just kind of get up, have your coffee, you know, reading, exercise, whatever you do.
I actually artificially inseminated a heifer this morning, daughter.
I was gonna get that file cabinet
They
yesterday.
have some animals down the road, and so.
That's something that nobody else does.
No, I mean, I had my arm up the rim of a cow this morning. You know, you have a glove on, but you know, artificially inseminated, but I was a dairy farmer.
They're not.
And then I worked as a consultant to a dairy farmer for 25 years. And so my kids have animals that they need bred every once in a while, so they have me come and do it because I did it for so many years.
Are they managing a farm still?
No, he actually is a consultant like I was, but they have registered dairy cattle, Holsteins, that they market. And so they breed their animals to high-end bulls. And so they do this in the side. It's kind of their, it's their investment. And they make some good money doing that, you know how to do the genetics right there.
Something extra.
Yeah, and so I have cattle, and so I trade grain and hay for my breeding services. And then I know the cows for them, they have like 4 or 5 cows that they milk, so.
Yeah, I know. I used to listen that I don't think anybody else.
No, I don't think anybody else would do
It
that.
makes you unique.
Yeah, I probably smell like it. I didn't
Yeah,
shower.
where'd it go? One's right there.
Oh, good.
You need this?
Hi, how are you?
I haven't known Kay in a long time.
Did you get a lot out of the house?
I did.
I love the first
Amy got this for me. It's a little flashy, but
I think that's what my hat looks like. That I bought a hat that has that stuff on it. It's not a very sparkly hat.
Yeah, it was that, it was the Rivers and Pleasures,
It's okay.
and then,
It made me scared, like, am I in the right business?
But you
Because
know-
everything that could go wrong.
but you know what County said, she's like, oh, right, because I said, oh, when I class, she's like, I really like that, she's like, you know, every time you just class like
No,
that.
not since the other day.
On their
Thank
listing,
you, Ryan.
I love those things. On their listings.
Yeah, my daughter's been
You know,
sick
they
all
take
week, and I'm like, don't give it to me.
But it just makes you
Stay away from
aware.
it. She kissed me last night.
Out there.
Sure. Like,
I kind of
you wanna
initiated
make
it.
sure
Kind
that
of the
they're.
warfare.
Right.
This, that, you know, all that.
I had my first off the other day, I missed my jump. That's all. Yeah, screwed something around.
Right, right. But I didn't need to do the board, but I'm doing this because I'm on my, chair. I'm sponsoring the next, I'm not sponsoring, I'm monitoring. The next one is, it's.
Buried in the backyard. Let's talk about how fantastic your shirt is in there.
Just a reminder to read the form.
This one right here. The next one is, she's supposed to be really.
Hey, just be real.
She's supposed to be really good teacher, it's procuring cause, and then would you buy this house? And that's on March 26th, so once March, because then we have flyer out. But that should be, yeah, that should be. We have about, there was like 25 some people.
That was good, that was good. There were some older guys, even older than me.
But anyway, yeah, so.
Do it.
I'm like 70. best real estate brokers on the other side, and I said, one thing, I just gave it one thing.
Advice on that.
Oh, yeah.
Commission.
The one of them
Anyways,
was-
it worked out.
We'll see what happens.
I haven't been up there lately, but I know that that house bill still below is quite the place.
You can see it right down from
I
his
bet you
house.
can.
It's got, you can like going over to you know where my station like Iron Falls.
When they're up there on the playing field and they're
Like
stopping
this
the
big.
divots.
Listing agent,
And
just
they're seeing.
drive by and
Like,
walk.
yeah.
We can't be friends. I'm sorry.
The servers.
If you're stopping on the property, you kind of walk around.
Yes! Oh my
But
gosh!
I live right on there.
Yeah.
It's not Todd, I walk with you.
There's tenants
No.
on your garage, I was there just when I gave
But
it.
I was still living.
We're check out the house.
I had one meeting Thursday.
Dad, what a good man.
It was locked.
We
So
want,
we waited for the show up.
we want.
I texted him, listing agent, and then they
He
wanted
was
to show
here.
up, and then she would let us know, and she goes, go.
Okay.
I'm not gonna come in your house. But she wanted to trust us. I got you on. Yeah, I think the dinner is.
I had to say that in the next one.
Only thing you know is my contract.
Not 2 hours, it's a long day. I heard my husband's like, let's watch Lord of the Rings. I'm like, oh God. No. Okay, so you make a list of movies that you always want to see, you've never seen.
But I don't know.
I think they just set up like that.
You give me a list of your favorite groups, and I'll tell you.
Okay.
War of the Roses.
Oh,
Best-
great
best
movie.
Worst movie of all time.
That is awesome. I love it at the very end, he tries to reach over to her and she flings him up. They're both basically dead.
It's great. Yeah, that's a great movie.
I haven't even got up her last thing.
It's Kate's fault.
Alright.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Todd.
Hey.
How are you? Good, good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for coming. Sorry I'm late. Kate kept me out there talking by the water cooler.
We're like, it's 9:12.
It's great to be here, especially it's great to be among the living. We live in a world of disclosure, so we have to get those out of the way first. This last weekend, I thought I was wading through a cold bug, and my wife took action on Monday, and Mama called the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, you've got a sinus infection. Oh, and also you're positive for strep A. So, I've been on antibiotics for a good amount of time. I am not in danger. I'm not a danger to anyone. So, letting you know of that. And also, I am gathering that you're assuming the class is free. Yes, the class is free. That's not entirely true. Not entirely true, because the cost of the class actually is that after the class, since I have a listing appointment in West Seattle tomorrow afternoon, I need you to go on social media and post that you went to this really cool listing class and tag me. But there is a guarantee to the class. So if the class is uncool, or if it ends late, you don't have to do the post. So there it is. What I'd like to do is I'd like to talk first about what this class is not, and I'm seeing it that's fairly small type, so we're going to go through all this stuff, but we need to understand what we're not here to talk about first. We're not here to talk about, you know, expanding your lead generation and talking about system tools to do all this kind of stuff. We're not talking about utilizing command and getting new tools for market analysis. Keller Williams has all of that stuff dialed in, and what we want to do is focus on some of the things that are just kind of outside of those margins that can take all of the tools that you have that you can access through Keller Williams and expand on those so that you can be distinguished as a broker that is perhaps a cut above some of the mainstream. And I was thinking about this class last year when my wife and I were actually shopping for a house in the Yakima area when we first moved here. There was tremendous urgency because we were in a temporary apartment in the basement of a duplex on Summit View, and the walls were cinder block painted walls, and the living room floor was concrete with a small area rug, and we needed to get out of there. So I was pulling out all the stops to try to find a house. And as you know, last January and February, not to mention the snow, the inventory was really tough. So I wound up starting to reach out to FSBOs to say, hey, you know, I want to come see your house. My wife and I are looking. We just recently moved to Seattle. And I need to tell you, I need to disclose I am a broker with Keller Williams. Oh, well listen, don't waste my time. I know you just want to take a look at the house because you want to list the house. And I started getting hit with this barrage that I haven't actually been hit with before. I'm used to calling FSBOs, say, hey, you haven't found the right broker. Or perhaps you haven't learned what brokers really do. It's more than just posting pictures. And I'm used to sellers saying, well, you know, you talk to them right, you're bold, and you can get an appointment typically with FSBOs if you kind of follow the script or you've got something in your head. But I was talking to these FSBOs. There's one that was downright angry at me for even calling. And I'm going, where is this coming from? And as I was looking up listings to try to find stuff, I also found that it was really hard as a buyer to get a good picture of what the listing was all about in some cases, unless it was listed by, say, Ryan or Kate or somebody who obviously had the package all together. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about elevating Keller Williams in ways that will distinguish this office as the office to list your home with, because they do extra stuff, and it might not be reality that you're not doing that now, but it's the perception, right? It's the perception of the sellers that matters. And the more we talk about this and extend about it, then it's easier to call those FSBOs. It's easier to call those expireds because you can articulate, here's what's been happening to you, and here's what will happen to you if you choose me to list your home. So, what this class is distinguishing yourself above the fray, above the folks at Heritage or Windermere or John L. Scott, so that folks know that if you're calling from Keller Williams, or if you're calling yourself with that story of what you do, it's much easier to get that appointment. You may already have reached out to them, but how do you convert that conversation into appointment and into a listing? So it is a growth of lead generation. More importantly, it's a growth of conversion. It increases trust with your client when we go through all of these things that we're going to talk about, which creates a happier client because they know what you're saying is the truth. They know that you're working really hard to make sure that their needs are getting served. And ultimately, it creates a reputation that leads to more referral growth. Ideally, if you have one listing, that should generate at least one listing to follow it. Be lovely if that generated two. So if you get one listing, you're hoping that that's going to expand. It's going to make your lead generation a lot easier. I, for one, hate cold calling. I can do it. I also hate the blanket emails because I happen to be very, very protective of my time and my privacy. So the cold calling and the emails, I prefer not to do. I prefer to kind of manage my client base and my sphere and let that do things for me too. I have a condominium that I sold in East Lake 2.5 years ago, and I've now sold 3 units in that building because the owners talk. So focusing on what you have and what you're working on, more than focusing on what's next, sometimes is scary, but it can turn into things and make things a little bit easier in the long run. Now, let's really kind of delineate the idea of what is considered kind of just okay and what that means to a client. And I want to give you the emotion behind what a client feels when it's just okay. So I attached my favorite commercial to highlight that you've probably seen. And the volume's off. So have you seen this commercial?
Yes. Figure it out when we get in there.
Yeah, let's see here.
He's all right. And the
Oh,
doctor
okay.
comes in and he says,
I forgot to ask about the volume.
"Oh, no, I'll go grab her." Almost. Not there.
All right.
Was it techie?
Oh, well. So anyway,
Guess who just got reinstated? Well, not officially. Nervous?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I'll see you in there.
Just okay? It's not okay.
So, have that feeling of, are things under control or are they not? Obviously, what we do is not surgery, but the stakes are pretty high, especially when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And one thing that you say to another broker or one thing that you don't do in your listing can cost tens of thousands of dollars, right? So it's pretty important that you're really on top of your game. So being just okay, it lowers the perception of value brought by brokers. So it does lead to more FSBOs, and it leads to a mindset that those FSBOs are being done by the sellers because they can do it just as well as any guy. You take some pictures and you put them online. There's Zillow. You post it on Zillow. What's more to it? I heard that time and time again. Transactions develop preventable pitfalls. if you're setting a listing and you're not reading through the preliminary title commitment, and you don't see that there is a lien for a contractor that had done some work 4 years down the road, and that's not resolved, then you've got a bunch of questions during the transaction when the buyer finds out, and you've got to go back to your seller and figure out, oh yeah, well that contractor didn't really perform the work, so I'm not paying them. Well, they've got a lien on your house, so we need to resolve that. Well, they can take me to court. Well, you can also not sell your house. So looking at all these things ahead of time and kind of foreseeing what some of those pitfalls are will help smooth out the course. And if you find things early, or if you find things during the process before everybody's at the closing table, then that's great too. I had a client who was selling a property, and they filled out the 22E, that FERPTA form, and they were they're from Hong Kong, but they're resident in the States, so they were able to check I'm not a non-resident. It's that double negative version that you have to look at and read 3 times. And it determines how much taxes are taken out for federal purposes. Oh no, this one was they were a non-resident alien for purposes of sales. But because of the buyer's choice in their boxes, it determines what level is taken out of their taxes. Escrow had screwed up and taken out the wrong amount of taxes, and when that that closing disclosure came through, I saw that the amount was wrong in the taxes. It seemed really high, and I went back and they'd done the wrong math. So before they went to the closing table, I was able to go back and forth with escrow and say, hey, this is wrong. You can't hold out this much money, and they were able to fix it ahead of closing. If no one had seen that, nobody would have realized it, and they would have lost, I think it was about, the difference was $15,000, just for double checking that one little thing. And that probably was the one thing that led me to another sale in that condominium, because it got out that, oh, Todd, he caught this stuff that no, even escrow didn't catch it. So looking for that stuff matters, even more than just helping your client, helping you create that flow of reputation. Otherwise, potential referrals just don't happen. If you're just okay, anybody can do that, right? However, why do you think lots of folks being just okay is good news for you?
Sets you apart.
The negative is that it casts a perception over the entire industry, right? Over the entire real estate market in the valley here. However, you leverage that by
It sets you apart.
yeah, it sets you apart. So you can create a space by which you develop a perception of, oh, this is the norm, but this person is different. This person does a lot more stuff. And this new service space, you get to control, because you share the narrative as to what those extra mile things really are. So it's great to have a spectrum, because you can talk about that spectrum in a listing appointment. Because now all of a sudden you can tell them, and in a listing appointment, I'll actually tell a seller, look, my recommendation is you really should talk to a couple of people to get a feel for the broker. You should talk about what they're going to do for you, what creates a successful listing. That said, I'll tell you what you'll hear most of the time. And I'll go through, yeah, I'm gonna take professional photography, I'm gonna run an open house in your listing, and I'm gonna develop a fabulous marketing plan. And you share all of the stuff that they're gonna hear. And then you say, but what you'll probably very seldom hear is to create extra buzz and visibility online. I'm gonna walk your neighborhood the day of the listing before the open houses and give invitations to all your neighbors so that if they have somebody that they want to live in their neighborhood, they're on top of it, and we can maximize flow into the open houses. I'll probably be canvassing about 75 houses in the neighborhood, dropping off invitations to the open house. Also, this particular house, because you're in an area that is amazing, but not a lot of people know about this neighborhood and the new amenities in the area, I'm going to develop a landing page. I have, through Wix, I've got a website space where I actually can create a multi-page website devoted to just a house, and I'll use that as a selling point too. And in fact, that'll be discussed tomorrow at my appointment. Say, you know, in Arbor Heights, not a lot of people really understand Arbor Heights as part of West Seattle and what it's near. And we're going to talk about the park a couple blocks away. We're going to talk about Westwood Village. You've got all of the shopping nearby. You're right around the corner from probably the biggest Safeway in the city on Roxbury. And talking about all the features so that you know that they know you appreciate where this house is and how it's unique and how we might need to get all of those things out. So say, you know, what people typically aren't going to do for you is they're not going to leverage the community to drive business to the house. That's what I do. I create a unique marketing plan for each house. Not every house should have drone photography. This particular house, probably drone photography isn't going to do us much good because we don't have the sweeping landscape. And we do that and we'll give people too much. We're going to answer too many questions, and it will cut back on traffic. The 3D Matterport tours inside. I know we don't have Redfin here, but Redfin has been big on that lately on their listings, doing 3D tours for every listing. It's great when you've got a fairly open floor plan and the flow works. You come down this beautiful hallway and you swoop up the stairs and go into these rooms. But here, the floor plan is such to where the 3D tours, we're probably better off with some really attractive listing photos to give people what they want to look for. My approach is going to be different for a house that is good for 3D tours and it is good for drone, but you have to know the difference. So here are the 5 topics we're going to cover and the difference between just okay and you guys. We're going to talk about modest and lackluster listing photos. What's the difference? We're going to actually look at some listing photos so that you can see what's out there and what's just okay and how it can be better. We're going to talk about seller forward staging. We'll talk a little more about that, but in short, seller forward staging is staging where you're looking at the seller more than you're looking at the home. The set and forget mentality, where a listing broker puts a listing up online and then they might have an open house to kind of break things open, and then they move on to the next one. And if flyers run out on the post, eventually they find out about it, put more flyers in, and when it sells, it sells. Irregular, infrequent client communication. That's a biggie, because a lot of times we just sort of feel, well, nothing happened this week. So there's nothing to report, so I'm not gonna bug my client. Your client needs to hear every week what's happening, whether it's nothing or something. And if nothing happened, then you need to be able to explain to them, we need to get a lot of traffic this week. And I've been thinking about that, and I've got a plan for creating more traffic next week. So here's what we're gonna do. And you're always thinking about what's next. I don't want to steal the thunder of some of the other slides, so I'll stop with that one now. Ain't nobody got time for this. The listing agent's demeanor with buyers and brokers. And how many of you have called a listing broker with some questions and you just felt like, well, sorry to bug you. So, modest listing photos. This is.
Sorry about that.
I like this one, especially because good listing photos are I'm sure you've heard this before, critically important, because they used to say 90% of buyers first start shopping online. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if it was 95 to 97 at this point. People don't just start driving around looking at open house signs. They're on Zillow, they're on Realtor.com, and they're shopping from their couch first, pretty much always. And if listing photos aren't tremendous, then they get less online traffic than the other ones that are. So let's talk about what a listing photo really is. When I'm looking for a house, I don't want to see a picture of somebody's bed. I don't want to see a picture of somebody's toilet. I don't want to see a picture of somebody's couch. And most often, that's what I see. This looks like a beautiful listing photo. You know, you've got a purple wall, and there's a closet right there with sliding glass door, and it's a lovely photo. But and a lot of times this is what we see in a listing photo. Probably because the broker has a good digital camera, and they say, my camera takes great pictures. But they're not getting a wide enough picture. So if you can't get a picture of the entire room, don't take the shot and don't put it on your listing. What you need to do is you need to be able to show what the room really is all about. And you need to tell a story so that when they look at that first listing photo of the outside of the house, especially if you don't have a 3D tour going through the house, your photos need to be able to offer a 3D tour of sorts. So you've been on the outside of the house, you've come in, and now here's a picture of the entry with the living room and the hallway, and then we're getting into the bedrooms. Oh yeah, I know where we are. Here's where that laundry service is that we saw from the living room out here and down this hallway. So, oh yeah, and they get a visual. But most of the time, the listing photo looks like this, because this picture can only be taken with a pretty expensive lens. You can't take it with a wide angle phone lens. You can't take it with even a $200-300 wide angle lens for your digital camera. Those lenses that take this picture, that give you straight lines all the way to the edge, that aren't like bowed like this, $500-800. And unless you're willing to invest in that to create your own photography, you also have to understand lighting, you have to understand color. There's a lot that goes into posting something online that really works and really grabs somebody's attention. And if you can't post this with the straight lines, the good light, and the pop on the color, don't do it. It's worth the expense. Seller forward staging. You've also heard this before. We had a meeting on staging that I came to a while back, and she was talking about removing a lot of the personal effects and editing what you're actually presenting in your listing. I always tell my clients, we want to get rid of as many of the family photos on the walls as we possibly can. Not because we're not proud of your son and your daughter, and I love the wedding photo from '54, and I love the current photo side by side. It melts my heart, but I don't want to tell buyers that much detail as to who's living in here. I want them to be at odds with what they think the priorities are, because this is going to be a business decision. I don't want them able to take advantage of anything that they see. We have to edit the bathroom. You're gonna kind of feel like roughing it, because we don't want any of the toothbrushes and toothpaste and all of the toiletries and stuff neatly organized on the counter. That needs to be either in a drawer or a box. It's about the home, not the occupant. Like I said, I don't want to see a picture of your bed. I want to see a picture of the room. I don't want to see all of the spices that you have. I want to see the storage. I want to see the cabinets. Your personal style is amazing. However, it can be really confusing to a buyer. We need to give them a canvas by which they can start picturing things. So I know this is going to be really hard for you, but the lamps, the sconces in the bedroom around the corner with the red bangles on them, and the chain that goes down to the plug, I have to take those down, and we're going to do it really careful. We'll wrap them up, and that way you can actually take them with you, and they'll already be packed. But this style is going to take the eyes of the buyer and go straight to this wall, and I want them to look at the room and start thinking about how they can use the room. Make sense? Is anyone picturing the listing that I'm talking about? That was a hard one. Are you thinking about the specific listing that I'm talking about here in East Valley? No, okay, good. I don't want to talk too much about my clients. Okay, seller forward staging. Now, these two I used from west of the mountains, because I don't want to use a listing around here, because I know you guys know every picture to every listing, and I don't want to call anybody out. And also, I wanted you to know that these are not issues that reside solely in the Yakima and Lower Valleys. These are issues that are everywhere. And I developed these ideas based on some of my cohorts in the Seattle area. So these are Seattle area photos. Granted, this was kind of a little bit of a fixer in the Seattle area. The listing was $439,000. And I look at that photo and I get mad. I get mad because the listing broker, I'm sure, was there for the photo appointment, and it would have taken them 5 minutes to take all this stuff and pull it out of the bedroom so that the photographer could get a better shot of the bedroom and not this mattress with a bunch of on top of it. This should have never made it to the Northwest MLS. Then another 3 minutes to put this stuff back after the photo was taken. And think how much more impactful that photo would have been without all this stuff in here. When you see this photo, you're looking at this bed, right? You're looking at the mattress with all the stuff on top of it. If it wasn't here, you'd be looking at, oh wow, is that actually oak floors? It is, it's actual oak hardwood floors. Wow, I don't even know if it needs to be refinished. Completely different discussion. Here's a listing photo of a kitchen. And again, I don't want to see what you bake with. I don't want to see what cereal you eat in the morning. If you're gonna do this, you have to pull all of this stuff out and maybe put a couple of, if you've got your own stamping stuff, or they have something over here, maybe there's a nice salt and pepper shaker or something over here that they've got on the counter. Put some of those things sparsely in this cabinet, if that's gotta be pictured. But all this stuff has to come out for the photo. And something else needs to go in there that looks artful. Every photo has to look artful. But beyond that, here you go into the living room and you've got a bookcase full of movies. There needs to, 2/3 of that needs to be pulled out. And the movies need to be stacked on the shelves artful. Maybe having them like this with one kind of leaning like that, and a little tchotchke in between the movies, and really appointed nicely. This listing photo, what you see is, first, you see a bunch of brown sugar, you see some huge canister of garlic salt, and something having to do with it. I think that might be kitty litter or cat food. And then you get done looking at that, and you go in, wow, they've got a lot of VHS tapes. Huh. Yeah, that's cool. I wonder what the kitchen and the living room look like though. So, it's all around us, but this is really good news for you guys, because this is your competition. Whether it's over there, yeah, over there, or here. So the set and forget it approach to listings. This is frustrating, and the next picture is very nondescript, but it is from around here. It's from a house that I live fairly close to, and it's frustrated me to no end, because the house is still on the market, and it shouldn't be. And I can look at the front of the house and go, these are two things that need to happen right away, because the first impression is killing this house. I don't know what kind of traffic is happening at this house. I haven't seen anybody coming and going. I haven't seen open house signs. I personally offered to do an open house at this next very limited picture that you'll see. It doesn't even have the house shown on it. But because it's at a different brokerage, she said, oh, I think that would be very inappropriate for another brokerage to hold an open house at my listing. If we're gonna have one, we'll do it through our office. And that's not how I'm used to having. If a broker from Berkshire Hathaway calls me on a Seattle listing and I haven't planned an open house for a weekend and they want to do one, knock yourself out. Lockbox is on the door. Thank you. They get the buyer leads. No one's going to be there anyway, and if they get somebody who wants to write an offer, they can. I don't do dual agency. So if I'm at my listing, I've got to refer it out to somebody else anyway. I know a lot of people do dual agency, and that's not an issue for them. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is, when you have a listing, you have to be focused on what your brand promise is for that listing. And you have to follow up on that listing all the time. This is only a picture of a signpost. What's the first thing that you see on this signpost? That was empty for 2 weeks. I know because I drove past that almost daily. 2 weeks. That makes me mad because I also know the seller. And I can't go to the seller and say, hey, look, your house is not being managed well. So you need to get out of that listing. You need to let me help you. I would love to do that, but I'm not allowed to. So it's left to just kind of languish. What is a brand promise? Anyone familiar with that term? Have you heard that expression before, brand promise? In business, in any business, you define yourself to your market by promising your market what you're going to do for them. And a good example of a brand promise that went really south is the story of Blockbuster, which probably many of you are already familiar with. Blockbuster, for the kids in the audience, sold or rented DVDs and VHS and all that stuff, and they were trying to figure out how to retain business that they were losing to mailing DVDs from Netflix and all the new competition that was out there, and streaming hadn't quite started. But late fees were a big thing, and it was a big frustration for people, because if you don't get it back that next day, which you rarely do, then you get tagged for a late fee. And then they came out with this huge campaign to say, no more late fees. And the ads were like confetti and parades in the street and stuff, and they made a big deal out of, we're not charging late fees anymore, because Netflix doesn't. And then all of a sudden, about 3-4 months later, they very quietly changed that back to having late fees. I remember going into the store and going, here's my thing. Okay, see, you've got an outstanding balance for $12, so that'll be $18.42. Outstanding balance for 12. Wait, what's the outstanding balance for? Oh, you've got a late fee on this other DVD. And they broke their brand promise by going off of that no late fee thing that they made a big deal out of. And more than the competition that they had, because you can always deal with competition. Any smart business is always going to have competition. Your job is to adapt to the competition and be better than the competition. But when you break a brand promise, then all of a sudden you have completely damaged your reputation. And that is much more harmful than failing to adapt to competition. Because that was pretty much the last time I stepped foot in Blockbuster. And I'm sure a lot of people felt that same way. And it wasn't shortly after that that store closed. So when we're talking in terms of our own brand promises, you can dial down and you can say, okay, I'm going to put a sign in the yard, and I'm going to actually have flyers in there that as people walk by, they're going to be able to take out. So they can take it home and they can read through this stuff. They can even share it with other folks. And I'm going to keep it stocked in there so people can always pick things up. This is a broken brand promise. And it's a $450,000 listing. So if that's a promise that they're willing to break, then it follows that there are probably other brand promises that they're willing to break. So you decide what you're gonna tell your client to do, and then you need to understand that what you told them is critical to follow through on. Whether it's communication, whether it's flyers, whether it's an open house schedule, those things all have to happen. We're also gonna, we need to also talk about the fact that with a listing, when you have a listing, again, you're not just putting it up, you're not just getting through that first week and trusting that stuff's gonna happen. We have a great tool. How many are familiar with the rankings feature for listings on Zillow? When you have a listing, and you go down, if you don't have an account on Zillow, you just sign up, it's free, it doesn't cost you anything to have a regular just account as a broker on Zillow. But it's a great analytical tool because it pulls listings of its kind all together and it shows you where your listing ranks. So if you know it's got 16 listings in this particular case right now, because inventory isn't all that great, you're not going to have 16 of the similar listings to go for, but you know that if there are 16 and you're ranked 8th or 9th in the middle of the pack, then that's not good enough. You need to be able to figure out, okay, well, what's everybody else doing to get more views? And the ranks on Zillow ranks on listing or views taken over, I think, a 24-hour period. So when you pull up listing on you pull up your listing on Zillow, there should be, if you've got the account, an owner view and a public view. And if the owner view pops up, you can scroll down and it'll say your listing is doing great, you're ranked number 2 out of 6 comparable listings. That's good. If it is number 5 out of 6 comparable listings, then you start analyzing. And your house for the last week and a half has not really been doing much. So you're going, okay, well, why has it not been doing much? You can look at a lot of different things. You can look at the price. Sometimes the price needs an adjustment. You can look at the primary photo that you're using. Maybe the primary photos of all of the listings above show a broader view of the territory with the house in it. Maybe it shows a different view of the house instead of what is everybody else doing that's getting more views, and do you need to switch out that primary photo? Do those have an advertisement for an open house the upcoming weekend? Do you need to add an open house to start generating views off of Zillow? Because it comes back to the fact that people are looking at your listing online. They're not driving by. So if people aren't seeing it on Zillow and they're looking at others more, then they've got more traffic, whether it's foot traffic or online traffic. They've got more traffic. So you want to try to boost that up. If my listings aren't in the top 3 out of 10, I'm looking at, okay, we got to figure out what to fix here. Because my listings, I always want to be able to say, Mr. Client, hey, we're ranked number 2 out of 6 right now, and the online traffic is terrific. So we're on the right track. You know, it's okay if a house doesn't sell in 45 days, if that's the norm. If the norm is 60 to 90 days, we're still on track. We're getting good views. So using Zillow to kind of analyze that along with all your other KW stuff, you're pulling all of this data together to figure out weekly what you can do to kind of spruce things up and keep things current, and you're communicating that to your client. The set and forget it, watch the Zillow rankings, always be doing a constant assessment of the market, and are your flyers, if you've got a box outside with multiple flyers, then are they stocked? And do they have the right price on them? When you change a price, you gotta swap out all of those flyers, so it has to be correct. Personally, I have a plexi holder with a little black cap that holds one flyer in it, and I attach that to the post. And then I have a QR code that I put on the bottom. There are free QR code generators online that you can go in and you can type in a link. I put a PDF in my Dropbox folder and I copy that link and I put that link into the QR generator. Makes a QR, I copy and paste it and I put it at the bottom of the flyer. So people can take their phone and go, oh, download e-flyer here, zip, and they've got the flyer on their phone. I don't have to keep printing up flyers because I pretty much know at some point I'm gonna break my brand promise because there might be all of a sudden 10 people walking down the street that day and then all of a sudden the thing's empty. And I don't have a little thing that generates when the last one gets taken out that, oh, your box is empty, oh, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Can't happen. So I know that promise is probably gonna get broken. So instead, I let people download their own flyer and, oh, I'm being responsible with my paper and my materials too. Lackluster client communication. I think that we've already kind of covered this, but basically the bottom line is if you're not talking to your listing client at least weekly to tell them what's going on or what's not going on, then you're not communicating enough. It's okay to call your client and say, hey, we're on track. We haven't had a lot of traffic this week, but I'm watching it really closely to see if we need to do another price adjustment or if it's time to do an open house. If we do an open house, I really want to be able to do something that's going to drive that traffic. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm really analyzing things, and probably by Monday, I'll have an idea if something doesn't shake loose this weekend as to what we want to do next week. That's all I've got to report for you right now, but I just wanted you to know I'm on top of it. If you've got things to report, you know what you're gonna tell them. If you don't do that, your client is often gonna say, well, you know, he or she, they put it on the market. I didn't really hear much from them. I've heard that a ton. Yeah, I put it on the market, but I don't know that they really did anything. Yeah, it sold after, I think it took like 45 days, but from their perspective, you put it on the market and then you sat and waited for offers to come in. But that's not really what happened. You've been looking at it every day and you've been trying to figure out, okay, is there a price adjustment? You did call them 2 weeks later, say we need to drop the price. You've been doing all this legwork to figure out what the right price is, but you only talked to them once, briefly, and then drop the price. But all they know is they never heard from you. We asked them about putting the house on an open house. We were willing to leave for the whole weekend, but they didn't want to do an open house. So I don't know, not much happened at the house. If you're not going to do something that the client asks, then what you probably need to do is explain why and why it's not a good idea and what the good idea is. It's okay to say, oh, this isn't really the right time for an open house. We've already exposed the house to the neighbors and we've had a couple of good open houses, but we've kind of exhausted the market for the looky-loo stuff, and I'm really trying to drive traffic for clients that have brokers that are coming in, and I'm tracking that right now, and I'm waiting to see what happens in the next week or two. If we decide we need to do a price adjustment, we'll do that, and then I'll set up an open house schedule after that happens. The price adjustment will kind of create sort of a renewed energy online, and it'll drive some new traffic into the house. Right now, we're just kind of waiting to see how all that's going to shake out. This weekend, open house probably isn't really going to do much for us, but it's possible that the following weekend might. So if you're not, essentially, you can be doing as much work as any broker might possibly do on your listing, but if you're not communicating regularly with your client, you're not doing anything in their mind. So that part is really important to add to your steps. So, don't be that listing broker that is annoyed by questions like, is there a lockbox? You know what, just read the listing. It's all there. Yes, the lockbox is on the front door. Just everything's on the listing, okay? Oh, sorry. Bye. Understand that you're gonna get calls with silly questions. I've had silly questions before. I go, oh, God. Yeah, of course, it's right there in the listing. Understand that the norm is that not everything is entered into the listing, because the spectrum of listing broker quality tells us that a lot of listings are gonna be fairly incomplete. So it's reasonable to assume that information's not gonna be in the listing to be available to you. So when you get somebody calling you, they may just be assuming, and they can't see it on their phone, because like me, I need glasses to be able to see all that stuff. They might be calling just to ask you something that is on the listing, but they're used to it they're used to not being able to find it.
90% of the realtors in Yakima don't even have the Flex app on their phone, so they have to call you.
Okay, so there it is. Don't be that listing broker that gives a buyer broker the impression that they're wasting your time, regardless of what it is. Be really, really patient with those brokers that don't read, because it might be that they don't have anything to read at the moment. Answer questions complete, but without divulging client information. So what's your seller's priority here? Why are they moving? Can you give me anything on what I should prepare for the offer? Well, it boils down to a business decision for them. They're just going to be looking for the most reliably closed, best all-around offer. We've been real careful on that list price, and if we get a couple offers, it's going to boil down to everything from the offer price to the strength of the financing, if there is some. That's one way to put it. You can also say, well, my client is a little bit confused. She's older and she's moved into a retirement facility, and really she's just looking for something to get her cash out. And all of a sudden you've given away too much information. That's information as a buyer broker I can use, and I know that you, the listing broker, just saved my client about maybe $30,000. So be careful the information you divulge, because you don't want to give away too much information. Offer to follow up on questions. You know what? I'm not certain about any paperwork on the oil tank that was removed. I know that they removed it. I'll get back to you. I don't have that information. So get back to your seller and find out what documents they have, and then follow up as quickly as you can with those buyer brokers. The listing broker that seems responsive and helpful is going to be that listing broker that buyer brokers feel is worth continuing with, because they also are going to go through the path of least resistance, right? They want to get a transaction for their client. They want to satisfy their client. And if it seems like it can be successful with Ryan more so than with Todd, then they're probably more apt to kind of call Ryan once in a while and touch base and maybe submit an offer, because that guy seems like he's pretty cool to work with. Whereas Todd, He was kind of a jerk. How you market a listing depends on the property. We covered that. Not all listings should stress the same marketing points. There are a lot of tools. Keller Williams has a myriad of tools to market listings. You've got to be able to determine which ones are going to help you and which ones maybe aren't. And customization helps in listing appointments because they're not always, rarely actually, are they going to get a listing broker